This is the final moment shown on screen before the Final Fantasy VII Remake cuts to credits. Throughout the entire game, fans of the original are treated to the most faithful retelling of the events in Midgar, and almost to a fault. And that fault lies in the game's ending, where the developers at Square Enix pull off the biggest bait and switch in gaming history. Welcome to the Fantasy Complex. Let's mosey. Let's look at some history. In 2015, at Sony's E3 press conference, Square Enix announced the Final Fantasy VII Remake, and the internet exploded. Finally, the biggest JRPG to ever grace consoles all the way back in 1997 was finally going to be given a chance to shine in the modern era. Although, 2020 is quite different from 1997, a time when developers could get away with things using polygon models and text conversations, leaving a lot of the story and character interpretations to the players. With an almost 20-year gap between the release of the original and the announcement of the remake, it was clear that if Square was going to do this right, we would see a lot and hopefully all of that pre-rendered background polygon model goodness reimagined into full HD glory. Initial hype was through the roof, but some remained skeptical. With the decision to change the turn-based battle system to focus more on action, along with the shortcomings of previous Final Fantasies, led some fans to question whether Square Enix was up to the task ahead of them, or if we would see another mess like the 13 trilogy. Initially, everything seemed to be going well, but then silence. For years, the fanbase patiently waited. Days turned into months, months into years, without anything to show from the remake. During this silence, the only information that was released was a plan. The idea to split the remake into more than one game in order to properly flesh out the narrative and forgotten portions of the original. But even this announcement was cryptic and unclear. How would the narrative be broken down? How many parts? And how long would we have to wait in between the releases, let alone the first one? All questions answered with more silence. Then disaster struck. Around May of 2017, it was revealed that the remake would be moving to in-house production at Square Enix for quality control, and almost all work done by third-party developer CyberConnect 2 would be scrapped. This only made the fanbase worry even more. A game people had been waiting years to learn even existed appeared to now be in a sort of development hell. Something Final Fantasy XV had previously showed us is never a good sign. Another 2 years would pass before new information would come out about the remake, creating a 4-year gap from the original announcement. It wasn't until May 9th of 2019 that Square Enix reintroduced the remake to the world with a new trailer that opened with the phrase, "The return draws closer." A self-aware statement from Square Enix that fans should only have to wait a little bit longer for the remake. And this trailer proved that, with a totally new look to the game, refined battle system, cleaner graphics, a new voice cast, and even the promise for more information in the near future. After 4 years of silence and uncertainty, Square Enix looked like they might actually deliver on the quality they promised when the project was moved to internal development. Leading up to the release, there was a lot of speculation certain scenes would be altered or cut, characters would be portrayed with toned-down personalities, or the game was simply too big and expansive to retain the quality from the original. Square Enix solved this last worry at E3 2019 by clearing up the confusion and confirming that the first entry in the project would only take place in Midgar, the original's opening city. A short delay and one demo later, the reunion promised back in 2015 was delivered. The Final Fantasy VII Remake was released on April 10th, 2020. With this game, everything from the original is present in Midgar, and turned up to 11. The bombing missions, Don Corneo, the stairs of Shinra HQ, the cross-dressing, they were all here and play out just as we all remember. Even new additions like the Trio of All Market seemed to fit naturally with the rest of the game, making everyone believe that Square had nailed it and were remaining faithful to the source material. Even going as far as to flash visions to Cloud, specifically of Aerith's death to provide some type of foreshadowing for the future games. The final scenes of the remake play out just as we and Square Enix would like us to imagine, with Cloud and company taking down Motorball on the Midgar Highway and about to leave the city in epic remake fashion. The entire game up to this point, and the long years before, have been the bait. But this is Square Enix, and director Tetsuya Nomura, so now comes the switch. The only true change to the game's narrative comes with the introduction of the Whispers, or Arbiters of Fate. Black ghosts only some characters can see that have been subtly keeping the timeline in check without any sense of foul play. In other words, Square Enix created an in-game meta-commentary about itself, saying that the narrative is stuck on the path of the original due to destiny. Or so we think. The actual end of the game sees the party having to fight the Whispers that have amassed to create a physical manifestation of destiny. Before the battle, Aerith warns the party, and even the player, that if they succeed in this fight, they will be changing themselves and find something more.
What will we find on the other side?
Freedom. Boundless, terrifying freedom. Like a great, never-ending sky.
This quote means more than just the expansive world outside the steel sky of Midgar. Freedom is for the developers. With fate destroyed, there is no longer anything keeping the events of the original game set in stone. As a fanbase, we all knew that this game was always meant to just be the first part of the original FF7 narrative. Of course the journey won't continue, and with development of Part 2 already underway, it shouldn't be long before we can continue that journey. However, the ending, and this message here, is Square Enix explicitly telling us that that journey is an enigma, and whatever expectations we have from the original game or this remake experience, they're just nothing more than a fantasy.